This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Happy New Year, all you beautiful writers out there. This week, we continue our conversation about the writing life balance. If you haven't heard part 1 yet, make sure you go back to episode 137 and give it a listen.
While you were talking about habit stacking as well, I can't remember if I've recommended this book before in the show. I might have. Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Did. You recommended it last year when we did our year-end, because I bought it. I bought it last year.
Yeah.
Yep.
I reread it, actually, just recently. And I think it's one of those things that might be one of those cleansing books that every time you kind of fall away from supportive rituals and routines, it's worth coming back to again, because he's so, his name is James Clear, but he's so clear about how to make this work without, a lot of these books often have rah-rah, or they're too simplistic. It's like, get up and go straight to the chair. Okay, but I'm not doing that, so why am I not doing that? And he kind of gives you a bit of the why and how to change things and how to do it smartly but efficiently, and some life philosophy in there about balancing things out and doing the things that are important to you, so that you don't get to an old age and think, well, if I counted up all the hours I just spent, 3,124 hours on Facebook, that's awful. That's somebody else's platform that won't need to pick for them.
Right. And I just read, you said, why am I not doing this thing I know I need to do? And recently I saw a talk on YouTube. I don't remember the woman's name, but I can find the talk and we'll put it in the show notes. But this woman created a 5-second rule where when you have to do something but you're procrastinating or you're afraid of the outcome and hesitating or you're whatever, you count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and you do it. And it's like this magic button that just cuts through all the mental BS resistance and sort of puts the body on automatic pilot. It's like you tell the body, make the phone call, and your mind starts objecting and freaking out and distracting you and procrastinating, and you just count down and the phone's in your hand, kind of a thing. Which I haven't played with that yet, but I love the idea of it, and it might be useful when you're like, why am I not sitting down at the writing desk now? And you don't even need to know what the resistance is if you can just count into the chair, right?
Yeah, that's we followed. I can't remember her name either immediately, but we've, as a family, watched her 30-day challenge videos, and she's got a big following because of that one TED talk that launched the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 idea. And it basically, it's a good way of interfering with your internal dialogue. So you can't be saying to yourself, but I need to do this, or I've got this, the busy mind talking, because it's just going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just get it done. And it is, I think it's it's a neat anchor as well. It's a stimulus response. So I'd recommend that video as well.
So we all mentioned that we've had some life challenges that have forced us to really look at our writing life balance. Do we want to get into that a little bit? Talk about some of what has been happening and how we're confronting it or figuring it out?
Yeah, well, something's got to change for me, that's for sure. I think otherwise I'm going to sit here, in 3 years' time and be telling the same story. I mean, it's not. I've achieved a lot in the last year, but it's not been. There's been one big thing missing in there, and that's been, releasing fiction. And I've either got to, get on with it or abandon it, basically, because otherwise I'm disappointing myself and readers. So, and I've had lots of stabs at there's something about. Maybe it's the usual thing, the middle of the story that's bothering me, and I want to make it so good. And it's the case of the band's second album that's got to be better than their first smash hit. There's a feeling of responsibility to it, and I think I've just got to put all those things out and just say, look, let's just get the first draft done. And it's ridiculous because I'm probably only 40,000 words short of finishing the first draft, and I can do that in 2 weeks if I wanted. So it's the question of, what's stopping me. So I think I've got to get back to the put myself first again, and regardless of what's happening. If I can get all these other things done in a year, then the whole, I've had stuff happen and I couldn't, is really just an excuse.
Right.
Because there are plenty of people out there who are in far worse circumstance than I, who don't have the flexibility of time that I do, who are still churning things out and getting their creative work done.
Right. But I think we have to be careful of saying, but there are those other people doing that, because it goes back to the comparison-itis thing, right? Well, I will share a little personal journey I've been on. So a few years ago, I put out Character and Point of View in the second Skog Hall book, and then I was working on the third Skog Hall, didn't finish the draft, didn't know why. I mean, it just felt like plodding. I've had a lot of fun this year working on my new historical book, and so I feel good about that progress. But so here's the journey thing, is I had that really amazing, productive year, and then I didn't have another one following it. And I kept asking, what's wrong with me? Where's my motivation? Where's my productivity? Where's my energy? Where's my drive? Why am I changing? I'm like, I know I'm not lazy. I know I'm working hard, but what's wrong? And I didn't really know where to look for an answer, so I just kept feeling bad about what I wasn't getting done.
Yeah.
And all of my time and energy and productivity was going into the things you need to do, those urgent things, the bread and butter things. And so it's not that my life fell apart, but all of these fulfillment things and, next step things were not happening for me. And then last year, my health started to change, and nothing too big or dramatic, but last winter, I was sick a fair amount, viral stuff, and had no energy. I mean, I felt like a zombie, and it was really impairing my function. But again, I could maintain the bread and butter, gotta do that stuff. And so recently, this fall, I started working with a functional nutritionist, and I've discovered that I've got some heavy metal toxicity, which may or may not be causal to my, distractibility and fatigue and all that kind of stuff. But then I've also got bacterial issues in my gut. So I've just been learning so much more about how the gut health affects your mental health and your overall energy and all these other areas of life, like productivity and drive and sleep. And so now I'm working on fixing that. It's not fixed yet, but I finally feel like I've got an answer. And it's not just me. It's not just something like turned off in my mind or my heart or my spirit, and now I can't do what I would love to do. There's actually like a physical impairment, a systemic impairment happening in my body that so now I'm excited to see what happens as I repair my body and how that affects my drive, my clarity, my productivity, my sleep, all those elements. So I think sometimes when we talk about stuff like work-life balance or creativity, we can kind of forget the health component and how much that might be factoring in. And so we just blame the self for not working hard enough, not being driven enough. So that's
Yeah, I think also if I look back at something that happened to me, and I won't go into deep detail about it, in somewhere around 99 2000, and I'd realised that I'd been achieving a huge amount with simple mental application, and I just forced myself. And nowadays, at 20 years on, I think it's well recognised that willpower is an exhaustible daily supply,
Mm-hmm.
and so what you choose to use it up on, it might be trivial, but that's why you can't. You're left with no willpower at the end of the day, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So. You can't rely on the willpower to say, right, I'm going to get my 2,000 words done today if your body's fatigued. So if you go back to what we were saying before about inputs, it sounds like, Alida, you recognise that the inputs have dulled your spark, or could have been dulling the
Right.
spark. And so that revitalisation doesn't necessarily come just from revitalising our mind. Sometimes it comes from revitalising our being.
Right.
And whether that be through a spiritual pursuit or a physical pursuit or an emotional pursuit, then that I think can be just as valuable for getting you back to your creative mojo. We used to have it. We used to have a yoga studio. We used to have a yoga business for many years, a few years ago, and I can tell you, when I did yoga on a regular basis, I got more things done, even though I was committing a huge amount of time every day to the yoga. It's ridiculous.
Right. What did that
So I
mug
think,
say?
yeah, exactly. I was thinking about that when he said that. So part of our renovation in these last few months has been, we've now built our own private hot yoga studio downstairs next to the laundry we put downstairs. We now have that, and I think the heat's actually been connected today. So we'll be able to get back to a regular practice there. So that will be an input for me that isn't directly an input of writing words, but is an input of vitality.
Yes.
And I think vitality is critical to any creative output. And we hear about the writers who are alcoholics, but there's a short-lived flame in that. There's burnout there, and I think the ones that keep it going forever and ever. And look at Stephen King. Read his life story in On Writing. The man went through years of abuse, self-abuse. And I don't think he would recommend it to anybody as a way of getting creative work out there into the world, even though some of his best work was written while under the influence.
Right.
I think that there's a lot of talk about, I think Joanna Penn talks a lot about, being a productive, healthy writer. I think it's not just looking after your body because you're sitting in a chair a lot of the time. It's also feeding your creativity, feeding your vitality, having regular inputs for that kind of thing, because you can't will the words on the page. They've got to come from somewhere, and maybe we're channeling them. Who knows? But it's a fire that has to be fanned.
It is, and I love the word vitality. I think that just gets to the heart of it, because in hindsight, now knowing that I have this problem, I can see how there was a year of losing vitality before I really felt like I wasn't healthy in the way I should be. And I was still active. I was still exercising, climbing, camping, kayaking. So that never changed, but definitely my energy levels changed. My set point changed, and it wasn't just a physical change. It was a mental and emotional change. It was the fatigue and stuff. And so I think being aware of ourselves holistically and looking at all those various elements is critical to being productive, creative people.
Indeed.
Kathryn, unmute, come on.
I'm going. Amen, 100%. One of the reasons I deep down believe that the reason that I have found this system for my writing is because I paired it with healthy eating and with adding back in a regular exercise routine into my life. Like, I do not think that those things could be separated out.
Right.
And I would not have the energy to make it through the rest of my day if I didn't have the good fuel, right? And the muscles in my body that know how to use fuel properly and all of those things. So I think we underrate all of that in our lives because we're so focused on the one goal, but it's amazing how all of the things that you take for granted in your life, like what did I have for dinner last night? That's why I'm not awake this morning. Like, it does so affect your own productivity. So
yeah, it does. And just I think I'm a pretty darn healthy eater too, but again, looking back with hindsight, I had an infected tooth, and so I had to go on a round of antibiotics, and that very well could have been when my gut biome changed.
Yes.
Something got out of balance, and then that starts this journey of several years of declining vitality. So, it's so important just to kind of track who we are, where we're at on all levels in order to be fulfilled people, to put out there what we want to.
Right. And sometimes it's necessary to reevaluate what you think you are doing properly, because you can get into ruts or, things that you're doing that actually aren't, even though you're like, oh, I'm a relatively healthy person.
Yes.
I eat relatively healthily. And then you look at your budget for the last month and you went out to fast food, 16 times. And you're like, when did that happen? I never used to do that, but we get into such habits that sometimes it's good to take a step back and reevaluate, what am I really doing?
Where
for
is
my
the denial?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think also, I just want to make a point, because we've kind of all zeroed in on a similar thing. We're not necessarily saying that everybody has to be a trim athlete who only eats well. It's not fair. Clearly, there are people with disorders and disabilities and who can't do those things physically. But I think what we're saying is your mental willpower is limited, and so whatever your state of being, you need to find sustainable ways to feed your creative soul, because otherwise it will dry up. Now, whether it's because your gut's out of balance, or because your healthy eating has gone off the rails, or because you're not doing your regular yoga, I think, as Kathryn said, it's helpful just to reflect back and say, okay, compared to when I was doing really well with this, what's different now?
Right.
And maybe it's, oh, okay, that was before I got Netflix. Okay, so maybe, so it could be as simple as that for somebody, that they can track it like that.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
it's not just about the holier than now. Yeah, you need to exercise and eat well and blah, blah, blah. It's a very Western world, first world problem type of thing. And some writers might not have that luxury. So I think what we go feeding back to is feeding the creative spirit and the creative flame.
Right. And no matter what your personal lifestyle preferences are, experiment, if your goal is to write first thing in the morning, because, that's when it works for you, maybe having a glass of wine at 9 p.m. doesn't leave you mentally clear at 6 a.m. Maybe you need to stop drinking at 7. And I don't care if you do or not. I love a glass of wine at night, but just play with it. Find out what works for you to help you achieve your goal, right? So it's not being prescriptive. It's about just saying, find out what's going on with you on all levels so that you can be the most productive, creative, best person you want to be, so you can meet your own goals and objectives. Because I definitely was not meeting my own goals and objectives as this timeline was progressing.
Yeah,
I just remembered her name.
What is it?
For it?
Mel Robbins. She's the one with
Excellent.
the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah.
Good.
Because that one applies no matter who you are or what your lifestyle. So.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Other final thoughts on life balance, or any other stories to share?
Well, I have one thing which it really bugs me, but this whole idea of the way we live our days, the way we live our lives, and I think that's something I have to pay attention to next year. And it's not that my days are rubbish. But if every day is a grey zone, or if every day is, I'll do that tomorrow, then it'll never get done. So, it's one thing being productive, but if the way, you think, you have this dream life in your head, I'm going to be doing writing, I'm going to go on this sailing trip, or I'm going to travel here, I'm going to do this with my family because I've got the luxury of having a flexible work. But, did I do any of that yesterday or the day before or the day before that or the day before that or the day before that? Well, no, then it's probably not going to happen tomorrow or the day after that or the day after that or the day after that. So I think the things that you can do now in your day are so important, because that's the only chance you've got to change anything.
Right. Absolutely. Amen. So I've got this little journal of mine that's my to-do list journal, and it has been so useful for me. And at some point on this journey of losing mental clarity and focus, I stopped using it. I let it fall to the side, and I would still kind of make to-do lists and such, but I've started using it again. And one thing I've added to it is just making a daily note of my top priority and 1 to 2 mid priorities, because it's so easy to do all the small things that don't push you forward and to neglect the big things. So at the end of the day, I want to be able to say, even if I only got to spend half an hour on my top priority, at least it moved the needle. At least I touched it, because sometimes the small things are the urgent things, depending on what they are.
Can be. It's very true. And then if you get into the habit, you fill everything up with small things.
Yes.
I know the famous Stephen Covey big rocks metaphor, where you've got a pile of rocks and a pile of sand, and you've got to get them all into the jar. And the trick is to put the rocks in first and then fill it up with the sand. And then the famous story is that someone was demonstrating this on a stage somewhere and said, so that's how you should manage your time. You do the big rocks first, and then someone kind of wanders into the room carrying a glass of beer, walks over it and pours it in and says, if you do it that way, there's always time for a beer at the end.
Nice.
Because there's still space between the sand.
That's right. There's always space. Atoms are 99.9% space. So there you go. We have unlimited space. We just have to find it.
Hey, we'd love to have a rating or review on your podcast distributor of choice, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, or some other. If you'd like to head over there and just leave whatever rating and review you'd like to, it would really help us keep the podcast going. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the StoryWorks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.